You are in Denise Maringolo's WebEx room. My name is Jessica Berstrom, and I will be moderating this session. That means I'll be monitoring the chat and keeping track of the time. As a reminder, please keep yourselves muted. If you have a question or a comment, you can post it in the chat. We're not using the Q&A, so please do post that in the chat. And you can do that by clicking on the chat button in the lower right corner of your screen. You can change the layout of your screen by clicking on Layout, which is located in the top right of the WebEx screen. If it's possible to leave your camera on, that's always helpful for whoever is speaking, but it may not be possible for you, and that's fine as well. So I will be putting a link into the chat periodically to the Google slide deck, which you can use to move to another session, to also see what's coming up next. And I'll share that several times so that people can find it. At the end of the session, I will also share a link to an evaluation form. You do not need to fill it out for each session, but we want to make sure that you do take a moment to evaluate your experience in the symposium as a whole. So we'll be sharing that several times throughout these events so that you have it when you are ready to do that. And we will get started in a couple more minutes to give folks more time to come in. And if it does end up being a small group, we will probably go ahead and have the Q&A with microphones on so that it can be more of a conversation. I'll still read people's questions, but then y'all can just talk. And that will be much more engaging. That phone number looks like maybe a Northern Virginia number. Is that possibly Curtis, Edie, Professor King?
I think that is Jasmine, who's on her phone. Yeah, I don't know where Curtis is, but we can go ahead and get started and hope that he shows up if you guys want.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
All right, I'll go ahead and get started. It's 11:11, so that's like my lucky time thing. So welcome, and thanks to Denise Maringolo for putting this together, and thanks to Jessica for helping us moderate. So we also have really good news. We're just yesterday we're able to announce that the Baltimore Field School, the BFS 2.0, which is called Undoing and Doing Anew in Public Humanities at UMBC, received funding from the ACLS. So yay, good timing, because I was going to allude to it in today's discussion. And also want to recognize, Sarah Fouts, who's here, who is the PI on that grant and is going to really shepherd that into the next stages. And of course, Tahir Mahdi, who you're going to hear from, who is an amazing evaluator and an essential part of this project. And hopefully Curtis, Edie will join us at some point. But if not, that just shows how community members get really busy, and sometimes the academic world is not their first priority. So good morning, and thanks to everyone who is in here joining us. I also want to do a shout out to Amani Spence, who is in here, who was the amazing program manager for Baltimore Field School 1.0. I guess we're calling the 2021 project now. So thanks everyone for showing up. And I'm Nicole King. I'm an associate professor and chair in the Department of American Studies at UMBC. And I was the project director for the inaugural 2021 Baltimore Field School, which was funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and was supposed to be the 2020 Baltimore Field School, but we all know what happened there when COVID hit and kind of paused the world. So I'm going to introduce my fellow panelists and then give a brief overview of the project and its Community Fellows program, and then turn it over to Tahira. So Tahira is a community psychologist, and she teaches in UMBC psychology department and is a consultant for projects in the DC Baltimore area. And I cannot recommend her work more highly. She was the Baltimore Field School evaluator and will work on the next iteration of the project, Baltimore Field School 2.0. And her work was immensely important for us. Next, I'm gonna introduce Curtis Edie, even though he's not here. He's Curtis Edie II, and he's the business relationship manager for Southwest Partnership and founder of The Beautiful Side of Ugly, which is a project using art to deal with trauma in Baltimore neighborhoods. And he was one of our 2 foundational Baltimore Field School Community Fellows in 2021, along with Eric Jackson of Black Yield Institute out in Cherry Hill. And so Curtis will be a senior community fellow in the next stages of the project in 2022, 2023. And finally is Lisa Snowden. Lisa is an independent journalist in Baltimore, the founding editor of the Baltimore Beat, and a force on Baltimore Twitter. She was a panelist on the scholarly reportage in The End of Extraction, connecting people and public information panel that was the culminating of the event of the 2021 Baltimore Field School we held at Red Emma's. And she will work with us on a community-based reporting project in 2022, 2023. So we're really looking forward to that. Thanks everyone for showing up. So I want to start with a quote from a Baltimore resident that was part of the Word on the Streets podcast from a course that I taught for Baltimore Traces back in 2016. And I'm going to try and play it. It's only a few seconds long, and I hope you guys can hear it. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it, and if you can't, give me a thumbs down, and I'll just read the quote, okay? So let's try this.
I say within the next 10 to 20 years, University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins is taking over the entire city. University of Maryland is taking over West Baltimore, and Johns Hopkins is taking over East Baltimore. And that's just how it is. They're unstoppable. But don't get me wrong.
All right, so I see this unstoppable takeover when I sit on my couch in my apartment and look out the window and see the iconic Johns Hopkins Hospital Dome and the 4 cranes that are currently surrounding it right now. And I also see this unstoppable takeover when I walk to catch the UMBC shuttle in downtown Baltimore, and University of Maryland Baltimore is demolishing a block of buildings for their expansion. And that block includes Club Buns, which was a historic queer Black space for Baltimore ballroom culture and just a great place to get a drink. So in Baltimore, erasure is a major problem. Erasure of places, people, independent media, Black neighborhoods, I could go on. And universities have served as agents of gentrification and employed extractive research methods in Baltimore and cities like it. And I am critiquing from within, not from outside. This is a critique that I put upon myself as a scholar and an academic as well. So in light of this institutional history, we asked, how can university faculty and grad students develop ethical and equitable, publicly engaged humanities projects in city neighborhoods? So that was the question of Baltimore Field School 2021. And the answer begins simply enough: we cannot do this work alone. And that's where the idea for the Community Fellows program originated. So we need those doing work on the ground in Baltimore to lead and to own public-facing research and teaching projects that we do in academia, or these projects will be failures. It is just that simple. And it is also not simple at all. But I think that we learned that rethinking institutional time and space within crisis allows community-centered reflection that might begin to cross the boundaries and the limits imposed by neoliberal institutions that value profit over people. Because it seems we are always and may always be in a state of crisis here in Baltimore. And we actually need each other to do the badass collective work that will start to create the change that residents of the city deserve. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Tahira to kind of take us through some of the assessment with the Baltimore Field School project. Tahira?
Sorry, I was muted. Okay. I'm going to talk through using slides. That's just better for me to, so you can actually see what I'm saying as I say it, so I'm not just going on. This is about the Baltimore Field School, as we're calling it, 1.0. And one of the things that really helped us shape our goals for the project and allow for a good comparison or checking with ourselves to see what goals we met was doing a pre-evaluation. So this entailed me doing interviews with Nicole King, with Kimberly Moffitt, Curtis Edie, and Eric Jackson. And it allowed us to reflect together, allowed the leaders of the project to reflect together about what they wanted to do, about their past experiences with projects in Baltimore. We established those common goals and actually got on the same page. So there was about a 22-page report that is the pre-evaluation report that came out of that work. And they discussed issues of historical reconciliation there. So that means they discussed race, money, power, the topics that are usually avoided when universities and communities decide that, hey, let's work together. And they also included survey results from university-based participants that we called fellows in that program, and they discussed their topics of interest. So there were 4 goals that came out of that. And in the final evaluation report after the whole program was done, we found that we met or partially met 2 of those goals. So the first one that was partially met was the mutual benefit between universities and communities. And that mutual benefit, part of the reason that it wasn't able to fully be realized was because of the pandemic. So we didn't get that true field experience because of the safety measures that we had to undertake. But also that embracing of the historical reconciliation. So that means panels, panelists, participants got to actually talk about that money, race, and power, those harms that have been imposed on Black communities in Baltimore, from the city of Baltimore, from the state of Maryland. And things that we'll be working on in the future. True service to community partners' stated needs and inclusion of neighborhood resident participation. But of course, some of that participation was impacted by the safety measures that we had to do. And then also creating a new culture of shared power. So realizing that community partners were not at the table from the very beginning as far as budgeting, things like that. And then both community partners brought up in their post interviews about this imbalance of access to the campus, including resources like not just place and space, but also people, students, and their expertise. So we did participant focus groups after the 2021 Summer Institute, and we found that there were many program successes. So it actually did what we wanted it to do, and the fellows talked about what they got out of it, certain things such as building this foundation for community building on UMBC's campus with their colleagues who are doing similar work. And it seems that they hadn't had much of that opportunity before that time. So this really gave them that opportunity. They also talked about being exposed to a wider array of ways to think about ethics. And many of them reported increased confidence in their teaching. Some of them, one of the ways that they talked about this was kind of knowing that things needed to change. They needed to do things a different way for this to work. And this gave them that confidence that they were on the right track or moving toward doing the right things and making good ethical projects. But they also reported increased perspective into career options and increased confidence in collaboration. And finally, they reported gaining new insights regarding that mutual benefit, relationship building, what ended up being called moving at the speed of the work, meaning you don't have to rush. We're usually adhering to certain timelines, whether it's grant, academic school years, things like that, but allowing that time to build. And we'll talk more about time as I go on. And also the notion of ongoing consent, not just getting consent at the beginning of a project, but getting it as you continue to work with people. And this is one of the quotes that it made me laugh when I first reported back to the participants what they had told me. One of them was that this whole experience for them, one person said it's too much, but not enough. And it wasn't just funny, it's just one of those things that illuminates the greatness and the fun of qualitative research, qualitative interviewing, where somebody's not just checking off boxes, but you get to see how people are grappling with more than one emotion, more than one reaction to a thing at a time. And this was just the tip of the iceberg when it came to ideas that seem like they're conflicting on the surface, but they actually really helped us to think about what happened and how to move forward with the work. So for example, participants talked about wanting more time to debrief after panels. They wanted more interactive panels. They also wanted more discussions about hypothetical and real life ethical dilemmas. They wanted more time to learn about and discuss one another's work. They also talked about wanting more in-depth how-to discussions about the logistics of planning. So when they heard from people like, and just for example, Dr. King, also Dr. Nicole Fabricant, different people who talked about their sustained longevity of working with different communities, they wanted to know, so how do you do that? How do you arrange for students to have transportation to different neighborhoods? But they also, and this was mainly from a lot of the graduate students too, about this how do you reach out to someone who is not campus-based and how to sustain that relationship with them. But this is one of the beauties of how things might contradict. So when we talk about wanting more time to do different things, the quantitative surveys, and also one of the questions asked within the interviews was this enough time? So you remember that quote, too much but not enough. And that kind of came through where the professors would say, based on their professional obligations, family obligations, other things, like a week was enough. So we were still thinking about that intensive setup, not just an ongoing time, but just a week or two of intensive. Graduate students were more likely to say that they wanted 2 weeks. But look at all of the things they already learned and so much more that they wanted to do. So that was one of the things that pushed us to starting to think about what were these other major themes that we had to think about moving forward. So time and relationship building turned out to be the two overarching themes of this whole thing from beginning to end. And became two big themes in the article that Nicole and I wrote about this experience. So moving at the speed of the work and also establishing trust and longevity were two things that became intertwined. So even though they are two separate concepts, they just fit together so perfectly, because when you're moving at the speed of the work and not rushing it, you are taking time to establish relationships. And that helps to resolve what Eric Jackson called this unnecessary dichotomy between university and community. And of course, when we do these things, we talk about university community engagement. A lot of us talk about the community as something abstract, the community. But this also, as I said, helped us to start thinking about the next steps with extending that time within that program and also decelerating these learning processes. So when we even think about that dichotomy, university and community, and writing the article, and even just doing that whole evaluation report, it made me think about this professional socialization process that we have as people that belong to the university, belong to an academy. So we have a concise time schedule when we think about not just class schedules, the timing of semesters, specific benchmarks of proficiency. You have the years of school, you have a graduate school, you can have the time for tenure, things like that. It's always like markers of different things. But that is a community culture. So it's a different type of community, but once university people who are doing these types of projects can look at themselves as a community also, and not just we are the university, those people are the community. They're coming from a community. And we can get insight into what type of community by McMillan and Chavis's seminal work on sense of community, in which they describe the construct of membership. So this gets into my research work. My area of work is studying membership and how it matches or does not match up with how different types of communities and the people in them experience belonging. So with membership, as it pertains to the academic community, membership is defined as when you've invested yourself into a community and you feel like you have the right to belong. So anybody here who's an academic, you've invested yourself in this and you feel like you have the right to belong. But as my research found, this doesn't always pertain to how other people experience how they belong to or identify with or experience a sense of community in a different type of community. Because even in membership, there are defined boundaries, and those boundaries are supposed to provide you some sense of security and trust because you know that these other people have invested something into this to belong. So this is, I had to put this in there as the model from my dissertation research, just to give you an example of how different other types of communities are out there and different ways of belonging are out there, where the university person might be coming into a relationship thinking of it as the same thing. You have to earn your right to belong, you have to do these things. But it came out a little bit differently when I studied the go-go music cultural community. So go-go music cultural community, go-go is a music genre, but it's a culture also localized to the Washington, D.C. area. So as you see in the red circle, there's a core community, and these are the people who would say us or we when they are talking about their community. And it's about personal knowledge and experience of whatever that culture is. There's also recognition. People recognize one another. The community says to the individual, you are one of us. It's not one of those things where somebody's feeling they've earned this right to be here. I worked so hard to do this. It is because the community knows it to be true. But then you see here, there's also room for supportive community. So in this study, people talked about, highlighted these words, love and support. They talked about people who have love for them, people who show support to them. And you know, if you've been in any type of relationship, whether it's romantic relationship, a friendship, employer-employee relationship, somebody can say, I love you, I support you, but you might not feel it. That's not love or support. You know what that feels like. So some communities feel that same way. They know what that feels like, and you don't have to be one of them to show them love and support. So this is just one of the ways that we can go forward and explore this reflection, self-reflection from people at universities seeing themselves as a community and not just we are the university, those people outside of us are a community or the community. And one of the takeaways from that whole thing is community is as community does. And we know who we are. And that should be important. And that's one of the things that we can reflect upon as we extend and decelerate that process as we go into BFS 2.0. And this is a quote from Eric Jackson, who talked about an undoing. And it became an important quote for us to really talk about how to move forward. And Eric Jackson says, there has to be, from my perspective, an undoing and then doing a new process. Our methodologies don't change because we don't unlearn them and because we don't spend enough time there undoing, feeling like the world is over, and then find ways, very smart and nuanced ways, of learning to walk again. And then going forward, one of the most important things coming out of the evaluation and going forward is that our community partner leaders supported the program. They see the mutual benefit that is possible, and they can envision their continued participation in this partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Tahira. And you just see how amazing Tahira is. And we really couldn't have gone to 2.0 without her work. So we're so excited to work with her. Again, I'm going to briefly go over what we're going to do in 2022, 2023, and how it's a little different. And then since Curtis Edie is not here, you improvise in this world. So I'm going to play a brief video of Curtis and preface that, and then we'll turn it over to Lisa. So in 2021, we had 2 community fellows. and 14 UMBC fellows. And that was 8 assistant professors and 6 grad students. We wanted to provide an equitable, non-hierarchical space for grad students and professors to come together. And next year, we're going to have at least six rather than 2 community fellows. And we're going to continue to develop models for community-centered projects and reciprocal work between university faculty, students, and community members. And the timeline is expanded and the space is expanded based off of the excellent work that Tahira did, and the access to the university is expanded. So with this time and investment, we budgeted more compensation, $10,000 per community fellow, and we based it off of a semester, summer. And we are doubling the compensation for our amazing project evaluator to $10,000 too. It's important, we realize, to ask people what they think they should be paid rather than to write them into a grant and come to them afterwards and offer them that money. So those are some of the things that we really have learned. And with this more investment, we hope we've focused on kind of 3 tracks. So the collaborative work will focus on access to public information and research, racial equity, and food and land justice in Baltimore. And we'll have 11 UMBC fellows. They'll receive the same $3,000 compensation they did last year for a meeting in the spring and a week in the summer to do the actual field. We hope we can be in the field, fingers crossed. And we also, as I said earlier, the leadership passed from me to Sarah Fouts. And I think it's really important that our choices are intentional, and passing the torch is an important way of seeing this work as a collective and not an individual work. As I said in my introduction, we need each other to do this work and to do this work well. So all of these choices are intentional, and they're invested in radical transparency on how projects are planned and executed, and their budgets. It starts from the very beginning. And we seek to center and further develop the Community Fellows Program and embed it in UMBC's culture and infrastructure for publicly engaged humanities now and in the future. So if Curtis was here, I would turn it over to him, but I'm going to quickly share my screen and play a video that we did. And this video, I always like to preface by saying this was back in 2019, before we started the Baltimore Field School project. Curtis and I have been working together for a long time. We went to interview him in his mom's house, the house he grew up in Poppleton, 319 North Carrollton Avenue. This is before we started fighting for this home to keep it from eminent domain, the city taking it for development. And so we're sitting in Curtis's setting up in his mom's home, and I asked him, he asked me, who do you want me to speak as, Curtis, who works for the Southwest Partnership, or Curtis, who grew up in Poppleton? And I said, I want you to speak as who you want to speak as. And he said, okay, I'm going to speak as Curtis, who grew up in Poppleton. So I give you Curtis Edie II, who grew up in Poppleton. Share my screen. No, don't show me in front of the presentation. All right, just screen. Right.
So I'm a, say, 3rd generation resident in the area. Family has grown between Poppleton, Franklin Square, and Montclair. And Southwest Baltimore has been home for both sides of my family, mom's side and mom's dad's side. So yeah, I would say this has been my neck of the woods for generations. My grandfather being a stable runner, I wouldn't say owned the stable. I thought he owned the stable in Highlands. And you would have thought that I was going to be, I tell everybody, an equestrian, just because getting a chance to ride a horse at 6 years old, trotting around this little square that to me seemed like acres. He had 6 horses at that time, a black beauty. It was like a gray polka dot brown, and then it was a white horse. And I was the only one of my siblings that go in, feed horses carrots, apples, and brushing the horses, climbing up in the hay room. Like, I really thought that I would grow up one day and then own this stable. Didn't happen, but having a chance to grow up and come back to the community and the stable still being here, it's a proud moment. Like, driving through the community and going by. My grandfather no longer is involved with the stable, but that part of his life, I think, just gave us a connection. I'm moving into a social entrepreneurism. But as an artist, I rap, I do more hip hop in general. So performance, art, DJing, and rapping, the MC aspect. it's my life. I feel like music changes the world. So with my art, instead of being, I guess, commercial artist, I took it into the school route. I was teaching hip hop. I created a hip hop curriculum that introduced STEM, science, and mainly engineering to youth. So as an audio engineer, they learn that they're troubleshooting audio, electricity. They're not just pushing buttons and DJing, but you are an audio engineer. You're taking two different sound codes, combining them, and then relating it out to the public. Like West Baltimore Street gets this nefarious, they get a bad rap. So with the bad rap, it's like nobody wants to go down West Baltimore Street. And I walk proudly up and down West Baltimore Street. The churches, convenience stores, grocery stores, entertainment spots, hair salons. It was a lot of mixed use up and down West Baltimore Street. Even the old gelato factory made it to like a Jeepers. So going there, playing miniature golf, um, like that was, you don't get that in the city. Now West Baltimore Street, I think it's about 25% occupied. So again, it's not really attraction or destination. And I would love to see a back bustling. Yeah, a lot of people who I know, who I've met in the past 2 years, who won't go on Baltimore Street, purchase houses within the neighborhood surrounding Baltimore Street. And it's like, well, why? Did you know about the history of these neighborhoods? They have been segregated by neighborhood boundaries. So if you never venture out to this business or this corridor, you're perpetuating this segregation. So for those who have negative perceptions or who have never visited Baltimore, who thinks it's only the wire, I definitely challenge you to come on down, visit us, go to Holland's Market, go to Lexington Market. Don't just go to the tourist spaces, but get out there, get into the mix with the people. Some of the best times is like the festivals. So like Air Fram, Artscape, Light City. These are some of the larger city festivals, so it's a great time for you to feel safe. You have a lot of other people here, but travel outside of those tourist spaces and into some of those neighborhoods, small pizza shops like Zella's, or pull up at Bill's Place, get some great eats, meet some great people.
Right. Trying to stop. Oh, there. I don't use WebEx a lot, so yay. So we're now gonna turn it from Curtis over to Lisa, and Lisa is gonna be a part of the project in 2022-23.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for allowing me to come today and talk. I really wanted to start with a quote that I found. I hadn't heard of it before this week, but it really speaks to the work that I do. Also, sorry, my cat has decided that now is the time for him to skedaddle all through my living room. All poets, all writers are political. They either maintain the status quo or they say something's wrong, let's change it for the better. And that's from Sonia Sanchez. And I think that that's really what propels me in my journalism. I started out on a very normal path. I worked at WJZ. I've worked at like standard newsrooms. And a few years ago, I got the chance to work at Baltimore City Paper when they were kind of reevaluating what journalism was and how it served or didn't serve the people in Baltimore City. They actually hired me because there weren't any other Black writers on their staff at that time. Baltimore City Paper, like most outlets in Baltimore, was a white staff speaking to the white parts of a 60% Black city. So the work that I've done is really like twofold, I would say, in that it is both highlighting the way that journalists that look like me are not in the newsrooms in the city, and the way that that creates kind of a distance between the community of journalists that write about the city and the people in the city itself, and the way that that does not serve us in getting the stories that need to be told about each other. So I was able to take part in a panel that Nicole and Amani put together a few months ago, which was really an amazing experience for me because the work that I've been doing, I got to see other journalists from other parts of the United States that are also kind of wrestling with these same questions. Like there were journalists on the panel from Detroit, there were journalists from the panel from Chicago. And those are really places that I look at explicitly when I'm thinking about things to do in Baltimore, although, you know, they're very different places, but again, they're places that are majority Black, but Black people have minority power. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Lisa. We're so looking forward to working with you over the next year.
Same.
So, yeah, so I don't know, is Curtis, are you in here? The phone number over there? Maybe not. Okay. All right, so I guess we will turn it over to Jessica to kind of moderate some questions. We're happy to take questions or kind of continue the discussion.
So because we have a small group, I do still want to ask you to put your questions into the chat and I will read them, but I also encourage everyone to unmute so that we can just have a conversation about these topics as well. And I know that we have a couple of people who are calling in, so it may be difficult or impossible for you to type a question into the chat. So please feel free to just unmute and grab our attention that way and just go ahead and ask your question directly so that we can include your voices too. And while everyone's thinking and getting their questions together, I do have one question for you. So one of the goals that you said you didn't quite meet that was sort of a goal for future was this addressing this problem of access to university resources and everything that entails. And I wonder if you have, it sounds like that's part of what you're planning to do with 2.0, right? So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what that might look like, what ideas you have. I mean, there's probably systemic things that need to change, but in the interim, right, with some immediacy, how do we address those kinds of issues when we are trying to do community led work?
It might be something for you, Nicole or Sarah, in planning that. So I think I just kind of made sure I raised that concern. But I think, Nicole, you mentioned before something about possibly shuttle access or something like that, or campus cards, other things that can make sure that anybody that we're working with has that same kind of access. One of the things I was thinking, or probably even at the people, I don't know if it's the participants or the fellows. I'm sorry, fellows are the participants. The community partners talked about just like making sure that space is accessible, making sure that people are accessible. So I think that also entails making sure that we promote Baltimore Field School a whole lot more at UMBC. So that will be my answer, is starting with promotion of the field school to not just administration, but a lot of other people on campus. So maybe we could get more ideas.
Yeah, and I see that Curtis has joined us, and I'll just kind of, yay! You made it, because this is a question that in the article Tahira and myself and Sarah have been working on that Curtis brought up. The question, Curtis, is about how we provide, you know, access to the university. And I think that's something that we really took from your suggestions in providing, you know, we want fellows to be able to have UMBC ID cards, to have access to our library, to our shuttle system to get folks from the city, where we use the Lion Brothers building. So Curtis, do you want to, now that you've been able to join us, talk a little bit about that and your experience as a fellow?
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, and thank you. I actually was on for about the past 20 minutes, just on my phone. Had a chance to listen. I couldn't talk, but I'm glad to be able to join you all and share. One of the main things I noticed, I didn't recognize it while as a college student. You know, you have just access through the databases of searching for business information, neighborhood data. So just getting access to having research in general. And since I haven't been a college student for about a decade now, not realizing the asset of having the access is. And then when we started researching for our neighborhoods, and my mom was trying to figure out some history data, and we were doing small projects, and it's like Google can only give you but so much, and then you have to pay for other information, other data. So it becomes a barrier for folks, especially who are already, a lot of the people who are interested in this information or kind of doing the work, more the activism and advocacy work for communities. They're at, a lot of them at an older age, and the technological divide alone. So just being able to help my mom, help a lot of her board members, just to navigate the internet and finding information or access points where they can go down to the library. And Nicole was able to help bridge that gap. So if we can help provide and fellows like myself with more access, I know I would definitely take advantage of it personally. Definitely. But having other resources like Mr. Bill Schroeder and his class, Shrewbridge, having the media, so we could do so much on our phone, or we can gather the content on our walking tours, but to be able to, during COVID, we was able to do like a virtual tour before the class started in the spring, in the fall, the fall before the spring course. And it was a great tool because you all weren't going to be open, and we didn't foresee that the campus wasn't going to open back up, but that's the way it turned. So just to be able to have other tools and technology that community members usually don't have, or just costs a lot to acquire, and they don't always give grant money out for certain tools to purchase or marketing purposes. I'm very grateful for the opportunity working with you all, though, just as a fellow. I'm learning so much, and just finding more ways to engage my community and how we can pull these stories out, not of just myself and my peers, but community stories, bringing people together just to have conversations through panels, having topics come to the forefront that a lot of these are unspoken discussions, or taboos in certain families, taboos in neighborhoods. So if we can start to have a comfortable space where conversations can be held. And I think that's one of the things I loved about the university, the diversity of having different people on a campus with a common interest. So now bringing those common interests of the people from the community onto the campus and sharing the campus experience with the community members, and in different ways. So yeah, I'm really excited for this opportunity to continue to go.
All right, Denise, I think you said that you had a question.
Well, now Curtis has all my synapses firing too. But I think, one of the things that I so respect and admire, and maybe even envy a little bit about your work on this project, is that you're working in the context of an interdisciplinary program. And I was trained interdisciplinarily. I was American Studies all the way through BA to PhD. I'm always surprised when I encounter again how other disciplines are a lot more, it's a lot more difficult for other disciplines to work in a community, in an open, collaborative, purely cooperative space with community members, because other disciplines are so strict about expertise and authority in ways that are really hard to navigate. And I'm going to say that in a history department, I find that to be true. I'm a public historian, so I value that kind of collaboration and different ways of knowing things as equal to the ways that I was trained to know things. I don't think I'm special. I just learned it in a different way. But I find that it's really challenging in some disciplines to do this kind of community-centered, truly collaborative work. And I'm always learning from you, but I guess I'm just going to ask again, what do you think we could do in the context of more rigid disciplines to rock that boat just a little bit?
Well, I think there's a community for all the disciplines, and even if you consider economic development or some business disciplines, they consider it's the same people but different targets. and people meeting people where their general interests are. So everybody isn't scholarly or studious, so they may kind of shy away from a structural type of environment where they want to come and have conversations. But I do see the growing need and just like a growing want and desire of different people from different ages across all groups, especially since COVID. Just like I want to learn a little more, or there's something outside of my box that I want to explore, and finding those common interests in the common interest groups. We have to kind of build those platforms. I'm willing to do some of that, like building with just different platforms in the communities, because I feel that institutions help to level the playing field at a level where you just kind of have a society of people who will have knowledge, experience, and they can come share their knowledge and experience with another society of people. But there's always a gap because, like you said, the walls that are built there. So we got to remove the walls and intermingle the people and let things kind of grow organically from there.
And Sarah has posted a question. There may not be enough information yet, but how does participating in the field school, how is that shaping graduate student trajectories, research questions, research practice, etc.?
May, this one is for you.
Okay.
No pressure, you just walked in the room.
The question was, how has this changed the trajectory or affected grad students, the field school? And since you were a fellow who's in here, I just thought maybe you could talk a little bit, maybe how it affected your research, to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. I've actually thought a bit about that. I think one of the ways it's changed it in a little bit. One of the ways I think that's most important is that it took me out of just being in the history department in terms of the people I was talking to and the practices we were working with. So meeting people in American studies and people like Sarah doing, food studies and things that were just not part of what we were doing in our siloed off place was really exciting and gave me new ideas and possibilities for practices in research and presentation. And then I'd say the second thing was learning more about potential ways to, this was the theme of it, but it was actually true, potential ways to be less extractive in doing neighborhood history research from folks who were doing it in these other fields, and trying to have more community-led, community-owned elements in these partnerships. So that actually changed the way I thought about the project. It changed the way I thought about engaging with my narrators in the project, and really actually opened it up to it being a more interdisciplinary project than it had started out as.
Jasmine, I see your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Hi. My name is Jasmine Braswell. Thank you guys so much for giving me this opportunity for being on the call. I'm another UMBC grad / journalist on the call, and my question is for Lisa. If we can still ask questions, I hope. But just kind of going back to what you were saying, Lisa, about looking at predominantly Black cities and comparing them to Baltimore, and kind of taking what they've done and incorporating that into Baltimore. How has that helped you journalistically, and can you give like a tangible example of that?
Sure. One of the things I remember, and I'm blanking right now on the name of the outlet in Chicago that came to the that was at the panel. So if somebody remembers, please feel free to throw it in the chat. I started watching them a few years ago when the Baltimore Beat, which is the news outlet that I started, when we were really up and running, because I saw that they were doing a lot of things that made it easier for the community to engage in like the legislative process, really. So what they've done is have situations where people, like just regular people, can sign up and they can learn to be, yes, City Bureau, yes. They can learn how to be the kind of person who goes to like a water bill hearing or a city council hearing or the Board of Estimates hearing, and takes notes and writes reports based on those. So it's not just, it makes sure that it's not just like this rarefied, you have to be a journalist thing to interact with this stuff that affects their everyday life. It's literally like, you are part of this now. And I think it's something that in Baltimore people have already kind of done just out of necessity. Like we have Court Watch, which tweets out, court hearings. We have Cop Watcher Twitter accounts that do the same thing for like police scanners, although that's a little bit harder, I think, now. And so I have not yet been able to really make it come to fruition here in Baltimore, but in kind of working on the beat, because we've been in a hiatus for a while, and figuring out how we can start working again, that's something that I definitely want to bring to Baltimore in a more like organized way. So just figuring out ways basically to make it so that like we can bridge that gap, and it's not just this thing where, oh, only I can do this thing and you don't have like the smarts to do it, because really journalism is not rocket science.
You're right. All right, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm afraid we're not able to discuss more questions right now, but I love that there are still more questions, and you will have an opportunity at the end of the day to talk about, lingering questions that you have about small or large issues across all of these panels. So I do encourage you to hold on to those. Right now, I want to ask you to join me in thanking our panelists. This has been a great discussion. And of course, all of you for coming with your, fantastic questions and engagement. I have just put the link to the Google slide deck in the chat again. You can stay in this space if you are interested in the next session at 12:10, which is Uncovering Baltimore's Real Heritage. And if you want to attend the other session, which is, let me see here, Lakeland's Legacy, you will want to go to Elaine's room. And so you'll want to go to that slide deck. Make sure you open it before you leave the room, because of course you won't be able to access the chat after you leave the room, and then you'll be able to use the link to enter the other space. I hope you will continue to enjoy the panels we have planned for today, but if you will be leaving after this session, please make sure to fill out the evaluation form that Denise has shared again. I will put that in the chat again as well. And once again, thank you so much. Let's have a little bit of applause here. Have a great rest of your day.